All right, guys, we have a new extraordinarily troubling report on just how often the FBI is searching Americans' data without a warrant. Let's go ahead and put this report up on the screen. This is from the Wall Street Journal. They say FBI conducted potentially millions of searches of Americans' data last year. The report says this was after Congress pushed them to offer at least some transparency about what was going on here. Let me read a little bit of this piece to you. They say the FBI performed potentially millions of searches of American electronic data last year without a warrant, U.S. officials, Intel officials said Friday, a revelation likely to stoke longstanding concerns in Congress about government surveillance and privacy. Gee, you think? An annual report published Friday by the Office of the DNI disclosed they had conducted as many as 3.4 million searches of U.S. data that had been previously collected by the NSA. More than half the reported searches, nearly 2 million, were related to an investigation into a national security threat involving attempts by alleged Russian hackers to break into critical infrastructure in the U.S. Those searches included efforts to identify and protect potential victims of the alleged Russian campaign. Now, in terms of the legality of this, after September 11th, Section 702 was passed into law, and that basically authorizes collecting of intelligence from international phone calls and emails about, quote, terrorism suspects, cyber threats, and other security risks. And data on Americans is regularly vacuumed up along with those intercepts of, foreign communications. So, for example, they say when a foreign spy is communicating with someone in the U.S. or when two overseas targets are talking about an American. So congressional lawmakers, a few of them at least, have been saying, okay, well, how often does this happen? And what do you do with this data? And how do you search it? Because they argue that doing so amounts to a backdoor search on Americans that dispenses with the requirements to obtain a warrant. Congress last renewed Section 702 in 2018 under Trump. It is up for reauthorization again, so this is extraordinarily timely info. So again, basically, the FBI is using this sort of legal loophole to be able to conduct these searches on Americans without warrants, and it's now a live issue in front of Congress whether they're going to continue to allow this backdoor, and potentially it is illegal and unconstitutional, violation of Americans' privacy rights.
Yeah, and actually buried down in the bottom of the report, they say that if there were at least 4 instances in which the FBI, due to factual consideration, should have sought approval from a FISA court before performing a search and looking at the content of communications and then didn't do that. The FBI has not sought approval from the court since the requirement was adopted in 2018. So that means over the last 4 years, they've been doing this, even though they are required by law in order to go to the court. I also love how they say stuff like this. A search for your phone number, your name, email address, and social security number does not constitute a search under the definition. Excuse me? Your email address, your phone number, and your social? I mean, those are 3 of what the most critical pieces of information about a person, under which you could pull credit reports, you can look at all sorts of open source information. I mean, look, I'm not saying a lot of that isn't already out there, but that definitely does constitute at least some sort of like personal interest search in terms of the US government looking into that.
Yeah.
It's just crazy that they can get away with that and not even classify that as a search in a database that they control.
Well, and these procedures and this authorization has continued under both Democratic and Republican administrations, obviously.
Yeah.
And during the Trump administration, you had a whole full-on conversation about Section 702 and FISA court abuses and unmasking, and all of these terms became very well-known on the right. And then they just go ahead and do the same thing and reauthorize the thing again. So at least that pushed some members of Congress, a few lone voices, to push for some level of transparency. And even within that, it's really interesting when you read the report, they phrase it as they conducted as many as 3.4 million searches. The FBI is like, it was probably less. And it's like, okay, well, why can't you just actually give us the number and a full picture of what's ultimately going on here? You're right to point out that, they view this as technically legal, using this sort of legal loophole established by Congress to do backdoor searches without warrants on Americans. They view that as legal. But then they acknowledge, as you're pointing out, that there was actually blatantly illegal behavior. And everybody's just like, do better next time, I guess.
They said they're adopting new compliance. Okay, to who? Who's watching you?
Where's the accountability?
Are you accountable to Congress?
Are employees going to be fired over this? What are the details here? How egregious was this? How widespread was it? We don't know.
Yeah,
Don't know.
This is what I mean. I mean, it's completely nuts. And even then, these new procedures were established back in January of 2020. Okay, it's been like 2 years. So more than 2 years since that happened. Are you in compliance? What does the new how did the compliance go? Has it been put into place? Is anybody in Congress asking this question? No. I mean, the amount of the things that these people get away with on a routine basis, and just look at all of them. None of them ever actually get prosecuted. They get these new jobs, some of them at Twitter, even though they're liars. It's just incredible. You know, James Comey's like a freaking multi-millionaire based upon his whole episode, and probably now works for some contracting company. It's just like that is always how it goes. I just think it's disgusting, especially when you reveal these things so casually. It's just like report says millions of searches, and everybody's just like, oh, okay.
Well, they're entrusted with so much power,
yeah.
And then they're given just complete leeway and total lack of accountability when they violate the extremely broad rules that have been set for them. So when you have that level of power, you have to be even more precise. You have to be even more, they should be even more accountability because, yeah, you have access to all of this information, all of this data, all of this money, all of these resources. And, at least there's a little bit of transparency here from Congress. I seriously doubt, because you know what else they do? And I saw them using this against some I think it's a combination of lefties and Republicans in Congress, but I'm not sure. There's some overly broad terrorism provision that some members of the squad are saying, hold on, we want to know more about what's going on here. And they use this stuff, they still do it to paint you as like soft on terror and why don't you want to keep Americans safe? And this was leaks coming from, Democratic members of Congress. So it's completely bipartisan. Just watch. When this comes up again for reauthorization, all the concerns, during the Trump administration about this, all the concerns that are being raised here, everyone is going to be too afraid to be painted by the media as soft on terror and probably just get reauthorized once again to your detriment.
Almost certain.
All right, guys, thanks for watching. More for you later. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.